Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The glass slipped from my hand and shattered across tile. My name is Evan Cruz, and I'm 31. Cold water ran over my knuckles as shards glittered. Lemon cleaner stung the air, and my throat tightened. Olivia stood by the door with a scuffed suitcase. The hallway light bled through the chain and painted stripes. Her bracelet clicked on her wrist like a metronome. "Don't follow me," she said. Then she gripped the handle. The fridge hummed slow while condensation ran down 2 bottles. A red notice clung to the magnet like a wound. "You are not listening," she said, and her voice thinned. I wiped the counter with a towel that smelled of bleach. "Say it's straight," I said with my hand on the sink. I wanted heat from the metal, but it felt numb. "You dragged me down," she said, and her keys rattled. A car alarm wailed outside and ran under our skin. She lifted a folded receipt and held it by the peephole. Blue light from her phone washed the paper like frost. "I found a place already," she said, and her breath tasted mint. My fingers crushed the receipt edge and left sweat marks. Steam curled from the kettle, though we had forgotten tea. The metal lid clicked with heat, then settled into silence. "We should talk tomorrow," I said, but my voice shook. "There is no tomorrow," she said, and the chain lifted. I grabbed the suitcase handle and felt the cold plastic. She yanked hard, and the wheels knocked against the frame. "Let me fix this," I said, and my throat rasped. "You had months," she said, and the zipper hissed open. Dust lifted from the bookshelf and tasted old on my tongue. A photo frame face down with one cracked corner like guilt. I turned it, and our beach smiles looked borrowed under glare. She stared at the frame, then looked away without blinking. Today burned from morning, and the office felt like concrete. My badge beeped red, and the elevator mirrors watched me. "I will fix it," I said, but the words tasted metal. She rubbed her thumb across the suitcase lock and waited. "You kept secrets," she said, and the hallway heater clanged. I kept quiet so the flames would not spread. "To who?" she asked, and the suitcase wheels squeaked again. "To you," I said, and my mouth tasted like ash. Coffee sat cold in a chipped mug beside the sink. A skin formed on top and smelled bitter like storms. "Drink it," I said, and I pushed the handle near. "I am done pretending," she said, and her eyes flared. I opened the closet and pulled down my frayed backpack. The canvas rasped my thumb and smelled like machine oil. I tossed in boots and a hoodie and a notebook. The zipper teeth bit together and echoed in the kitchen. A keyring waited in the ceramic bowl by the door. I pressed it into my palm until the grooves hurt. "You can keep the couch," I said, and I stared. "We cannot keep what died here," she said, and breathed. The elevator dinged once and threw pale light across linoleum. Cigarette smoke drifted up the stairwell like an omen. She rolled the suitcase out, and the door bumped my heel. I followed to the threshold and tasted rain on dust. She stepped into the elevator and stared at the numbers. "Don't call me," she said, and the doors met slow. The last sliver of her face cut through the mirror. I held the key to nothing and heard myself breathing. I turned the key and the engine coughed. Cold vinyl stuck to my neck under orange streetlight. The steering wheel felt greasy and hard in darkness. I breathed stale fries and counted crumpled bills. A security truck rolled by, and the radio crackled. I raised the thrift blanket and hid my face. Diesel fumes slipped through the window and scratched my throat. I listened for boots on gravel and waited. Morning burned white through the windshield and woke me. My coins clinked in a cup holder like tiny alarms. The laundromat door chimed and heat washed my cheeks. A crooked bulletin board hummed under neon light. I saw a faded card pinned beside a lost glove. Community woodshop open nights glowed in bleached ink. Detergent smelled sweet while paper softened against sweat. I pocketed the card and felt something shift. I dialed on my cracked phone by a gumball machine. My battery flashed red and a line hissed. "Come after 6, a man said. He hung up fast and left static ringing. The warehouse door rolled up and coughed dust. Fluorescence buzzed overhead and filled everything with glare. Sawdust smelled like warm bread across a concrete floor. The table saw stood quiet like a caged animal. A tall man wiped a plane with a rag. "You the new guy," he said. I nodded and tightened my grip on the strap. "Name's Raphael," he said, and he watched my hands. He pointed at a push broom leaning by a bucket. "Start with clean floors," he said. I pressed the handle and felt splinters bite skin. The bristles scraped loud and raised a dusty cloud. He slid a steel clamp across a scarred bench. "Try that on scrap," he said. The screw turned gritty and pinched two boards tight. My heartbeat matched the hum of the lights. I set a chisel and tapped with a mallet. The edge skittered and tore fibers like bruises. "Not like that," he said, and he steadied my wrist. His hand was warm and smelled faintly of cedar. He showed the angle and drew lines with a pencil. "Let the tool bite slow," he said. I shaved curls that fell like golden ribbon on steel. The bench vibrated softly, and I finally breathed. A drill screamed from the corner and rattled jars. I slid foam earplugs in and tasted salt. The shop air glittered with dust under bright tubes. Raphael sharpened a blade and watched without blinking. We stopped by a dented kettle and paper cups. Coffee smelled burnt while steam licked the metal spout. "You staying nearby tonight?" he asked. "In the car tonight," I said. He nodded once and slid a key on the counter. "Spare for the gate," he said. "Return it tomorrow and lock up after midnight." The key felt heavy and warm in my fist. I traced a circle on plywood with a paint can. Chalk dust puffed and clung to my shirt. "Try a stool top first," he said. The pencil rolled toward the edge like a dare. Hunger crept in as the vending machine thumped. Peanut wrappers smelled sweet and tinny under buzzing lights. I ate slow and studied a beat-up mallet. The clock hands crawled, and I kept cutting lines. Near midnight, the roller door clicked and settled. I turned off the saw, and the silence boomed. The concrete felt cold through my boots and jeans. I curled on a tarp behind a stack of lumber. The shop smelled like pine and something close to home. I held the gate key and listened to the night. Neon bled through the windows and painted the clamp silver. Tomorrow would cut deeper if I proved I belonged. The saw kicked, and the plank jumped under my palms. Pine dust floated in the white shop light like smoke. I eased the board back and felt the blade's teeth. The stool top wobbled on the bench, mocking me. Raphael tapped a level against the leg and frowned. He smelled like cedar shavings and strong coffee. "Bring the leg in by a hair," he said. His knuckle rapped the wood like a slow drum. I set the leg in a vise and tightened. The iron jaws bit the grain and steadied my hands. Sandpaper hissed as grit burned warm under my thumb. The edge turned smooth and gave a whispering shine. "Try the fit again," he said, and he watched close. Fluorescence buzzed while the stool stood on concrete. I pressed each corner and listened for a click. Nothing knocked back, but I still waited. He pointed to a flyer stapled near a toolbox. "Saturday market needs vendors. Start small." The paper smelled like ink and rain when I touched it. "Space is cheap," he said, "if you hustle." I counted screws in a mason jar and thought fast. Metal clinked like coins inside a bell. "I can make 2 by Friday," I said. He nodded once and slid a tape measure over. The vending machine thumped out a stale pastry. Sugar stuck to my tongue and tasted like chalk. I scribbled prices on a torn index card. My pen scratched dry, but the numbers held. At the library, my laptop coughed blue light. Keys clicked loud while a space heater hummed near my feet. I printed 2 tags and the ink smelled sharp. The tags curled warm in my hand, then cooled. I opened an old inbox and felt sweat rise. The screen showed freeze-framed warnings in harsh red. "Unauthorized access flagged on a budget file today." The subject line blinked like a police siren. I dug in my backpack and found a scuffed drive. Plastic edges scratched my finger and woke a sting. I slid it in and waded through a whine. An old spreadsheet opened with edits I never made. Initials glowed in the corner like graffiti. HL stamped every change with quiet confidence. Cells moved money between accounts like cups in a trick. I watched the trail bend fast, tore my login. My phone buzzed on the desk and vibrated hard. The screen lit my knuckles with cold blue light. "Call me now," my sister texted. I stared at the drive and felt the floor tilt. "You heard something," I typed, and my thumb shook. She answered with one word and a blinking. "Yes," she wrote, and then nothing. Behind me, papers rustled and the printer coughed. Outside, the wind shoved at the door and rattled glass. I pocketed the drive and smelled winter on the air. Streetlights smeared the sidewalk and hit a puddle hard. I carried the stool to the car, careful. The diner's bell rang bright as I stepped in. Bacon fat hung heavy and warm in the light. A woman wiped a chrome counter with a gray rag. "Nice stool," she said, and she looked at the legs. "It's sturdy," I said, and I set it down. She leaned on it, and the feet barely sighed. "How much?" she asked, and she lifted a brow. 25 today," I said, and held her gaze. She opened the register, and the drawer clacked. Bills smelled like sweat and metal under fluorescent glare. "Deal," she said, and she slid 2 tens and a 5. The stool looked proud behind the counter, like it belonged. Back in the car, the heater clicked and wheezed. I folded the bills and tucked them in the visor. My phone buzzed again, and a new bubble appeared. "I have a recording. My sister texted. You need to hear it." I gripped the steering wheel and felt the vinyl crumble. Headlights washed the windshield and smoked the glass. I typed one word and watched my breath fog. "When," I wrote, and the reply came fast. "Tonight," she wrote, and a pin dropped on the map. The spot glowed near the river under a bridge. "Wear a hood," she added, and then went quiet. I looked at the scuffed drive, then shut my eyes. Back at the shop, the roller door rattled hard. I clicked on a lamp, and the shade glowed amber. A clamp squealed, and I tightened a fresh joint. The stool frame groaned, like it knew what waited. I set a small hammer on the bench and listened. The neighborhood hummed low and distant in the dark. Raphael's toolbox clicked shut in the corner, empty. I packed the drive in my pocket and locked the gate. I slid under the bridge and felt the wind bite. River water slapped pilings and carried a sour smell. Sodium light haloed the graffiti and shook in ripples. A crushed beer can roll by my boot and rattled. Footsteps scraped gravel and then paused near the pillar. A thermos clicked and hissed as steam drifted white. My sister stepped into the light with a tight jaw. We faced the dark water like it might answer. "You came fast," she said, and her breath smoked. I kept my hood up and washed her hands. She lifted a small phone with a spidered screen. The glow cut across her cheekbones like a blade. "This is bad," she said, and she rubbed her wrists. Metal echoed above us as a truck groaned past. I took the phone and felt cold plastic bite. The cracked glass caught the orange light like ice. Earbuds tangled around a battery and smelled like rubber. I pushed them in and tasted dust on the cord. She touched my sleeve with cold fingertips and waited. I tapped play, and the recording woke with a hiss. A door thumped somewhere, and paper scraped on wood. A man cleared his throat, and the mic scratched. "Make him carry the budget hit," he said. The words landed heavy and rolled through my bones. Another voice slid in with a low hum. "We said we were promoting him this quarter," he said. "Not after this," the man said, and the chair squeaked. "Shift codes to account 307, quietly." I paused the file and stared at the concrete. My pulse drummed in my ears like distant drums. "Where did you get this?" I said. She dug in her bag and pulled out a key card. The card smelled like plastic and printer ink. Janitor left their cart near the conference room. "I borrowed it," she said, and her voice shook. A coworker saved the voicemail by accident, then panicked. I hit play again and felt heat rise. Shoes squeaked, and a glass clinked against the tabletop. "I want that raise first," a woman said. "You will get it if he signs," the man said. My mouth went dry as the river churned. Cold spray dusted the railing and stung my lips. "Who is the man?" I said, and I knew. She watched my face and let the silence answer. I rewound 10 seconds and listened for breathing. The mic picked up a laugh like a match strike. "We scrubbed the logs tonight," the man said. "No email. Keep it clean and finish early." She handed me a folded printout that smelled of toner. A screenshot glowered in rough black lines under glare. He wrote about me in the subject field. I photographed it, and the shutter popped like a spark. A cruiser rolled across the bridge and washed us blue. Tires hissed on wet tar and faded into rain. She tucked the thermos into her bag and shivered. We stepped deeper under shadow and pressed the phone flat. "You cannot sit on this," she said, and she clenched. I slid the file to my scuff drive for backup. The port clicked, and the light blinked fast. I watched the copy crawl like a fuse toward detonation. "I need proof they moved actual numbers," I said. She nodded once and pulled a notebook with soft edges. Phone extension list glowed under her pen beam. This line patched the call, and this one recorded. We crouched by a shopping cart and smelled rust. Rivets scratched my palm as I steadied my weight. Give me the original, too, I said. She tapped the screen and sent the file again. The river slapped harder as wind shifted west. A tarp flapped nearby and snapped like a flag. Take care walking back, I said, and I meant now. She tightened her scarf and stared at the dark. I am not hiding, she said, and her jaw set. Then go while it is still quiet, I said. She squeezed my shoulder, and the fabric rasped dry. Her footsteps faded into grit and then vanished. I leaned on the pillar and watched the current turn. The phone warmed my palm and smelled like ozone. The night held its breath like it wanted more. A freight horn wailed upstream and shook my chest. Back at the car, the dome light burned pale. Rain drummed the roof and ran in thin rivers. I cupped the earbuds and played the end. Paper rustled again, then a single word, perfect. I killed the audio and stared at the wheel. Vinyl peeled under my thumb in ragged strips. I typed a new note in my cheap notebook. Saturday market can wait, but money still matters. Dawn smeared the windshield with cold gray light. My breath fogged and then bled away in streaks. I drove to the shop and tasted old coffee. The roller door rose slow and scraped like a growl. Inside, the fluorescence threw hard light on steel. The kettle moaned and filled the room with steam. I set the phone beside a square and exhaled. Raphael's boots thudded behind me like heavy stamps. You look wired, he said, and he hung his jacket. Oil smell rose from the pegboard and mixed with pine. You have a van today if you need it, he said. Keys clinked on a bench and flashed like bait. I lifted a sample plank and ran my thumb. The grain felt alive and warm under dust. Can you spare clamps in 1 hour, I said. He nodded slow, then lined clamps in a row. Blue strings snapped as I pressed edges tight. The shop fan roared and ruffled rags on a hook. I planed the seam until it whispered clean. The board lay flat like a promise under light. My phone buzzed against the level and jittered. A new message flashed with a small crown icon. We saw your stool at Center Diner today. Could you bring a sample table top Orchard Hotel? Steam curled from the mug and smelled burnt sweet. Raphael read the screen and raised one brow. You deliver and you smile, he said. You get a check or a clear no. I sanded until the pad warmed my fingers. Fine dust rose like smoke and settled on clamps. The edge glowed soft in the harsh lights. I wiped with spirits and watched the sheen bloom. By noon, the van rattled under bright winter sun. Wipers squeaked across faint drizzle like rubber on glass. I set the plank on a wool blanket gently. The city rolled past in streaks, fast and gray. The hotel lobby smelled like lemon polish and heat. Marble steps glowed and caught light like water. A woman in a navy blazer checked a tablet. She eyed the plank and nodded once. You are on time, she said, and she tapped. I set the sample on a brass cart slowly. Her ring clicked the wood when she felt the grain. Can you do 12 by Thursday? Same finish. I tasted copper and then forced a breath. The ceiling spots burned bright and mirrored in marble. Yes, if we start now, I said. She wrote a figure on a card and slid it. Elevators chimed and the sound lifted my spine. The ink smelled sharp as I held the card. We approve by midnight if the sample holds. Wait for my call and keep your phone charged. I carried the plank back and felt nerves buzz. Rain brightened the street and tasted like metal. The van's engine coughed and then found a rhythm. My phone vibrated again, unknown number, persistent. I let it ring until it died in static. Another call rose and tugged at my hand. I answered and heard air moving like a vent. We should talk at once, the man said calmly. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel slowly. Light from the hotel sign washed the windshield blue. About what? I said, and the silence stretched. About returning to the team and resolving mistakes. I held the phone close while rain needled the windshield. Static hissed in my ear and lit the dashboard blue. Speak plainly, I said, and my thumb tightened hard. His breath passed the mic like a slow leak, waiting. We can smooth this over, he said, and he cleared. Return to the team and sign a short agreement. You will receive a bonus and a title today. I stared at the hotel card and felt heat rise trap. What agreement, I said, and I rubbed the steering wheel. The van smelled like wet wool and old glue. Just a routine understanding to protect clients, he said. Send the language, I said, and the call went quiet bait. I drove to the shop while wipers scraped and chattered. Fluorescents snapped alive and painted steel a harsh white. The kettle moaned on the hot plate beside clamps. Raphael looked up from a ledger and waited, measuring. We have 12 to build fast, I said, and I exhaled. Varnish sweetened the air and clung to my throat. He slid a pencil behind his ear and nodded once, then shut doors and stacked blanks, speed without noise. A heavy knock shook the metal frame near the hinges. Oil smell drifted from the alley and curled in cold. The landlord held a brass padlock like a threat. Rent by Friday, he said, and he tapped the chain hard. Give me 48 hours, I said, and I met eyes. His breath tasted like tobacco and stale coffee. 48 and no stories, he said. He slapped the padlock into his palm, then left. The planer screamed and spit warm ribbons across boots. Sawdust dusted my sleeves and turned sweat into paste. We fed maple through the knives in steady rhythm. Boards came out flat and shining, good starting bones. I glued edges while clamps groaned and bit down. The shop fan boomed and pushed a cold draft. Raphael brushed glue strings with a dull chisel. He checked joints by feel and never looked away. The hotel called while the timer clicked on the shelf. Her voice sounded crisp against office noise and vents. Your sample passed our test under service lights. Deposit wires now if you email the invoice today. Printer toner smelled sharp as paper slid warm. I typed each line and checked figures twice. Send it, Raphael said, and his ring tapped the desk. I hit upload and watched the progress crawl inching. 2 guys from the night class knocked and hovered. Their jackets dripped near the mop and left puddles. Neat hours, the taller said, and he flexed gloved hands. Grab sanders and goggles, I said, and keep masks tight. The orbitals whined and made the tables hum. Fine dust floated silver through the strip lights. We moved in lanes and swapped pads fast. Edges rounded clean and smooth, then vanished into stacks. My phone buzzed again against the tape measure. Unknown number blinked white and felt predatory. We can meet at Bayview Coffee in 20. I glanced at the clock and tasted copper choice. Raphael poured bitter coffee into a dented mug. Steam fogged his glasses and smelled like burned caramel. Go if you must, he said. I will ride herd here. Keep clamps honest. Bayview's grinder screamed as I pushed through the door. Warm bread smell floated over cold glass cases. He waited in a corner under a buzzing cone. A manila envelope lay beside a folded umbrella, quiet. Sit, he said, and he smoothed his cuff. Espresso light flashed across a polished watch. We value your skills and your discretion today. Sign, and we make the past disappear. Elegant. I touched the envelope and felt thick paper edges. Ink bled through one line like a shadow. It mentioned confidentiality and non-disparagement and forgiveness. My jaw clenched as the milk steamer shrieked, warning. I need a letter clearing my record, I said. The words tasted like metal and old fear. Back pay and the bonus you withheld. He blinked once and traced the napkin, thinking. That seems aggressive, he said, and he almost smiled. The room glowed amber and held its breath. It also seems deserved, I said, and I waited. Or we discussed this with regulators and the board. He shifted in the chair and the legs scraped. Coffee smell thickened as a barista wiped foam. We can adjust the letter for reputation concerns. He slid a check across the table, tempting. The check felt slick and cool under shop light. Numbers looked heavy and perfect against pale stock. I set it under my palm like a nail. This covers rent, not silence, and you know it. His mouth tightened and his eyes went flat. You could come back stronger with our banner. He lifted the umbrella and looked at the door. Or you could fight alone and bleed, slowly. I stood in the chair, feet screeched on tile. Rain knocked the window and left crooked trails. I picked up the envelope and shook my head. Send the letter tonight or expect company soon. Back in the van, the heater thumped unevenly. A receipt curled on the dash and smelled like ink. I tucked the check in my wallet behind a photo. The photo caught a slant of light and watched. We ran assembly lines until my wrists burned. Glue cooled tacky as timers pinged and reset. The radio cracked with a ball game nobody tracked. We counted finished tops in chalk, 10 and 11. The deposit hit as my phone chimed bright. Numbers glowed clean and fierce against dark glass. I screenshot the alert and felt air return. Raphael grinned slow and knocked the ledger once paid. We hired a neighbor with a dented pickup. Exhaust fumes hung sweet near the loading ramp. He hauled finished blanks to the varnish room. The door swung wide and breath solvent. Dangerous. Brushes whispered as coats laid down like rain. Light bounced off wet grain and made it pulse. We tipped the edges to avoid heavy drips. The racks filled until what looked like bronze alive. Near midnight, the landlord reappeared with a sniff. Cold air poured through as he lifted the chain. I held out cash and the receipt book fluttered. He licked a thumb and wrote slowly, then nodded. I stacked paid invoices under a metal clip. Paper rasped and smelled like dust and toner. "You will have a sign soon," Raphael said. He tapped a plank cutout that read Orchard 12, promise. We loaded the van while the alley echoed. Ratchet straps clicked and tightened around padded corners. Breath smoked from mouths and drifted like fog. The last top slid in smooth, tight and safe. Sleep pulled at my eyes like wet cloth. The shop clock ticked loud under buzzing lights. I lay on cardboard by the drill press. The press cast a long shadow over Boots guard. The phone rattled in my pocket and buzzed twice. A message glowed from a number I knew. "I heard about the hotel," she wrote. "Can we talk tomorrow? I want to see you." I lifted the first tabletop and felt the weight bite. Cold morning air cut my cheeks under white shop light. The dolly wheels squeaked as straps tightened over blankets. We rolled the load toward the van, racing the clock. Raphael swung the door and the hinges groaned. Coffee steam rose from a thermos and smelled burnt sweet. He checked each corner with a square and nodded twice. I slid the last piece in and locked the latch go. The van engine coughed then settled into a growl. Streetlights blinked off as gray dawn thinned the sky. Wipers scraped mist and left clean arcs on glass. The hotel awning glowed ahead like a signal, "Deliver." Bell carts rattled over marble and echoed sharp. Lemon polish scented the air under brass sconces. We set a top on sawhorses near a column. The manager watched the grain flash, waiting for a flaw. She ran a palm along the edge and smiled. Warm light pooled on the wood and made it pulse. "Perfect height," she said, and her ring tapped twice. She signed a clipboard with quick strokes, then pointed deeper. We carried each piece into the dining room slowly. Silverware chimed in stacks and sounded like rain. Servers breathed in the varnish and looked relieved. The room brightened as tables took shape, one by one. A photographer moved around a brass lamp and crouched low. Camera shutters clicked fast and sent little shocks. "Hold that corner," he said, and his boots squeaked. He took a close shot of the logo stamp proof. My phone vibrated on a folded towel near plates. The lock screen flared white and buzzed again. "Guests are already asking," the manager said. "We will tag your shop tonight. Do not miss." Back at the van, the air tasted like metal. I counted our ratchet straps while traffic hissed. Orders pinged and stacked until the screen blurred. Raphael whistled once and slapped the door. "Pace yourself." We hit the shop and the fluorescent screamed awake. Glue smell lifted again and curled thin and light. I wrote ship dates in chalk on a metal board. The numbers lined up like marching boots tight. The landlord stepped in and brushed dust from his sleeve. Old paper smell followed him like a tired coat. "You paid on time," he said, and his eyes softened. "I can extend another year if you want it." "Slide the lease," I said, and my pen clicked. The page rasped under my palm and felt gritty. He boxed the signature and stamped a red seal. The stamp thudded like a gavel arse. My phone lit with a name and froze me. Rain clattered on the skylight and hushed the room. "Can we talk today?" she wrote, and then nothing. I stared at the broom leaning against the drill, decide. "Come by at 6, I texted, and I swallowed hard. The shop clock ticked and threw thin shadows. Raphael glanced up from her router and said nothing. He wiped the bit with a rag, steady as stone. We cleaned sawdust off the floor with wide pushes. The broom bristles hissed and left dark paths. I set a fresh candle on the counter for smell. Cedar and orange drifted through the office, soft armor. She stepped in at sunset with a bouquet. Lilies flooded the air and felt heavy on breath. Her coat dripped onto a rubber mat by the door. I set the flowers on a stool, out of reach. "You look different," she said, and she watched my hands. The ceiling lights hummed steady and held a silence. "We have a line to assemble," I said. "Say why you came before it gets late." "I was stupid," she said, and her voice tangled. She rubbed her thumb across the bouquet wrap. "I picked the wrong side because I was scared." She stared at the plainer knives, waiting for judgment. I slid a small box from the drawer and opened it. Cold metal flashed as the overhead light hit. "Your key belongs here now," I said. She blinked at the dish and nodded once. "Understood." Boot steps sounded on the concrete and grew close. The door cracked, and a colder to draft swept in. He walked in with a leather folder and a smile. Cologne cut through the wood smell, sharp and clean. "Evening," he said, and he set the folder down. The brass corner gleamed under the hanging lamp. "We have an agreement to finalize tonight." He tapped the cover with one fingertip, performance-friendly. I lifted the folder and felt thick paper inside. The pages rasped like fine sand against skin. "You brought a release for me to sign." He held his grin and said nothing, practiced. I opened my drawer and took out a packet. Toner smell rose as I spread printed pages. "This is my letter clearing every record." "This is your signature line and date, no edits." "Bold," he said, and his voice flattened a notch. The clock on the wall ticked louder between words. "The board will not enjoy public confusion tonight." He glanced at the lilies and then back calculation. A car horn bled through the alley and faded. I slid a pen across the table and waited. He picked it up and turned it like a coin. Ink glinted under the lamp and then paused. My sister stepped from the doorway with a small speaker. Its blue light winked once and then held steady. "Play it," I said, and she tapped the button. Static hissed, then voices spilled, crisp and undeniable. He closed his eyes and pressed lips into a line. Perfume from the bouquet mixed with hot dust. "We can be reasonable," he said. I signed, "You do not gloat," and we move on. "Add one more page," I said, and I tapped. The paper slid under his hand like a blade. "You will fund scholarships for this woodshop. You will send letters to every vendor," corrected. Raphael set 2 mugs on the bench without speaking. Coffee steam rose and drew thin curls in light. He stood behind me like a wall of oak. The room quieted to the sound of ticking verdict. "Fine," he said, and the word came out small. He signed the letter and dated each page. Ink smell thickened and edged into my throat. He pressed the pen down and left a deep groove, binding. "Take your check too," he said, and he slid it. The paper felt slick and cold on my fingertips. I pushed it under the letter and clipped both. The binder teeth snapped shut, like a trap reversed. He reached for a handshake and held it midair. The desk lamp burned a bright ring around his wrist. "We are good then," he said, and his tone cracked. I let the silence answer, louder than words. He left fast, and the door thudded behind him. Night air rushed in and smelled like rain on concrete. My sister exhaled and leaned against the tool chest. We listened to the city hum, then grinned. She touched the lilies and moved them off center. Petals bruised where her fingers pressed the wrap. "You handled it clean," she said. I looked at the letters and felt heat earned. The hotel tag went live as my phone lit. Flashes of our tables filled the screen in waves. Orders stacked and made the icons wobble. I set the phone down and steadied my breathing. Focus. We pulled the banner from a cardboard tube carefully. Fabric smelled like dye and new plastic. Raphael helped stretch it over 2 cedar poles. The letters spelled Rivergate Furnishings, crisp and proud. Neighbors wandered in with paper cups and warm bread. Music hummed from a small speaker near the vise. I cut a red ribbon to length with tin snips. The ribbon shone like candy under the shop lights, waiting. My mom slipped through the crowd with a folded napkin. Tea rose on the steam and warmed my face. She hugged hard and held on 1 second longer. Her eyes watered as the bell over the door chimed bright. The manager arrived with a black folder and a smile. Perfume trailed behind her like a soft line. 12 more for the rooftop bar, she said. She placed the contract on the bench and a pen. I signed while glue dried on a nearby joint. The pen slid easy and felt warm in hand. She shook my fingers and looked around the shop. This place has a heartbeat, she said. Keep that sound. I turned to the crowd and lifted the scissors. Metal flashed under the bulbs and drew a breath. Ready? My sister asked, and she held the ribbon. I nodded once and cut clean, like a start. Applause rose and bounced off steel and wood. Cedar's smell swelled as the door swung with guests. I rang a little bell and felt the vibration. The note hung in the rafters, bright and steady. She waited near the drill press with hands folded. Her nails clicked the bouquet wrap once like a tick. I cannot fix yesterday, she said. I can be better for real, if you let me. I set the lilies on a shelf beside a level. Dust glittered in the beam from the desk lamp. We work here now, not there, I said. Thanks for coming, and keep the path clear, please. She nodded and wiped a cheek with the back. The room glowed softer as the crowd thinned. I folded the signed letters into a metal box. The lid clanged shut and echoed, solid and final. Raphael lifted a finished top and whistled low. The grain caught the light and looked like water. You made it, he said, and his smile creased. I gripped the edge and felt it hum alive. I stepped outside as night settled over the block. The sign burned white and threw a clean halo. Keys pressed cold against my palm and steadied me. I locked the door, then faced the street, unafraid.